What's up, everybody? This is John Thacker and Jake Harrell. We are the founders of TBH Logistics and continuous improvement professionals, here to talk with you about operational excellence. So for those of you that don't know who we are, or have just met us on LinkedIn or whatever, a little bit about me. Went to college, went to grad school, MBA, some supply chain classes from MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics. And I've worked in supply chain, a lot of manufacturing, some 3PL, and run a few sites and more than one site at a time, as well as serving as a senior manager for continuous improvement in a network. So operational excellence, core to my heart, and I've had the opportunity to go about it for some time, see what works, see what doesn't, and really have a passion for sharing that with you guys. Jake?
Well, I'm the meme celebrity of LinkedIn. If you know continuous improvement memes, that would just be me. I've done absolutely none of those things. My career started in manufacturing and bled into 3PL, and I kept saying, pick me. And there was a group of dumb enough people that said, sure, why not? I made my mark in engaging the people actually doing the work and using CI as sort of a philosophy, blended with a sense of humor and vulnerability to do what I do today.
And Jake's being a little modest. He's had some really outstanding outcomes, and I think I can say that because you've worked for me. And we also wrote a couple of books, and kind of like this show, it's geared at the regular person who wants to be excellent. And that's really our passion. So today we have, I think, a really interesting topic, particularly for like ops managers, general managers, and it's tied into an article that I wrote recently on LinkedIn about the effect or role that senior managers have in improvement projects. And there's kind of a lot to unpack here, right? So let's start with structure and talk about that a little bit. So when I say a senior manager, I mean a director, a VP, somebody that has like multiple sites, right? And I guess we need to start with the difference between continuous improvement, which is just how your business should be run, but we know that that's often not the case, right? And an improvement initiative, right? So I think every site that I've worked for at one point or another, somebody senior in the company has said, oh, it's an emergency, we gotta fix something, right? We gotta fix the site. In fact, I've been hired to do that, right? What's your experience?
Well, we all too often precisely conflate continuous improvement with rapid improvement, which could CI as a philosophy. Rapid improvement is a set of deliverables I got to do right now.
Right.
So we're missing entirely how we bring into the daily aspect of how we're affecting culture. And I would say largely what I come into the most is somebody that just wants their culture fixed. That's what they're searching for. Is just fix the demographic, or the area is bad, fix the culture, and they don't really understand what that means or what it is.
No, I think that's fair. I actually interviewed for a position where, the hiring manager said, we want you to come in and fix the culture, right? And of course it was a huge red flag because, a person doesn't fix the culture, especially not like a leader, right? Culture is what we do and say every day at work. And a leader might have an amplified voice, but it's still just one. It's not the processes, it's not the systems, right? So, when we talk about continuous improvement, it's a philosophy, it's a culture, right? It's what's happening every day. So have you been in a situation where a site had a continuous improvement culture and still needed like sudden rapid improvement?
Absolutely. So I'm very grateful to have been on both ends of the coin, where I worked at a site that most definitely, they didn't have a single thing broke down, but they had built into their culture, every employee was in charge of how can we make this better, and still completely missed the bucket. And that came from, at a senior leadership level, they really didn't have clarity around what they wanted. So without knowing the precise outcomes they were going after, improving in a direction is always good, but if it's not the right direction, it's near meaningless.
Right, yeah. And that starts to get into, hey, senior management can have significant influence one way or the other on outcomes, right? So you can have a site with a continuous improvement culture and still need sudden rapid improvement. You can also have sites that don't have a continuous improvement culture, and I think in my experience they need these sudden changes more, right? Because they kind of just truck along until they're not competitive, right? And then all of a sudden they have to improve. What are some other reasons to need sudden rapid improvement?
Well, generally it's a change in business dynamic. So coming out of like the third-party logistics industry, it is often or not, we've signed off for more than our mouths can cash.
Oh yeah.
So sales and the actual operation are dishinged from each other. And we said, give me X, I can only provide Y.
Yeah.
The gap, John, figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think that, is the Achilles heel of 3PL. Right, and for those of you that aren't in third-party logistics or aren't familiar, briefly, third-party logistics handles some aspect of the supply chain for somebody else. I was in Robert Bosch's supply chain in North America, ran a foreign trade zone for them, and eventually they actually took that back in-house because their standards were very precise, and it was just more efficient for them to bring it back in-house, right? But for a lot of companies, it's a cost play. It's also a leverage play because you probably don't have the staff to open another warehouse, right? That takes a lot of leadership out of your pool, and most companies don't have a dozen people standing around waiting for you to open the next warehouse.
Well, I've definitely seen it done poorly, and I've definitely seen it done exceedingly well. Where when there is scope changes from what was initially engineered, they go back and re-engineer what that solution should look like. It's not that complicated of a design once you decide that's what it needs. But if you never come to terms with, hey, this needs a re-engineered process, you keep throwing people at it and saying, hey, continuously improve out of this, which will just never happen.
Right. And I've experienced too where customers asked for something that was unrealistic, and like you said, the sales department, and here we're talking about senior leadership again, right? They just want to make that sale. They just see the zeros, and so they say okay, and they don't know how. And sometimes they're unwilling to hire the right expertise, and sometimes they're unwilling to listen to the right expertise.
Yeah, well, just to the point of the first paragraph in that article, the most successful thing I've ever seen is they hired the right expertise and said, we're not giving you anything. Like, you go all throughout the rest of the year with nothing other than fix this stuff. You have all the resources. If you need to spend it, buy it. If you need it from me, you got it. And it's given a credit card and a get out of jail free card to go mess stuff up.
Yeah.
And sort of included that within that aspect is that they know failure's coming. Like, they know you're not going to do everything right immediately, and you're not going to have those right answers. And they've clearly voiced they don't care.
Right.
That's really the secret.
So that was an example of senior leadership doing things well, where they said, okay, we know we need improvement here. We hired a guy to do it that has the right background and experience, and now we're going to give you a mandate to improve, and we're going to clear all the obstacles out of your way. We're going to give you a credit card. We're not going to tell you what to do. You come back in 3 months with success. Something like that, right? Yeah, that's a high trust environment, right? So, okay, so if you guys are still following along, we're talking about senior management and its effect on rapid change processes. Okay, and there can be positive and negative effects. So first, there's a difference between continuous improvement and rapid improvement. Like, we need to change fast. Something has to change. We need to do something differently, right? And most companies have that experience, even if they have a continuous improvement culture. Now, CI cultures usually experience it less, right? But it can happen. Okay, so now we need a rapid change. program or process, or we have to improve. It has to happen really quickly. So senior management has an effect on that one way or the other, right? Sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes they kind of check out. Have you experienced that?
Yep, where that silo is completely unrelated to the actual work being done. There's sort of a blanket, yeah, we need better outcome, but I'm not talking to you. I'm talking sort of around you or near you. And it comes from what I think is just not understanding the actual work being done.
Right. And I think sometimes that's intentional, right? Like I've worked for companies where you have like a vice president and they almost have like this 1950s attitude or something like, well, I'm just a boss. I'm here making money off of the hard work of your back, and all I'm supposed to do is sit in an office and smoke a pipe and tell you we need more, right? And they don't want to walk the Gemba. They don't want to know what their business actually is. How do you actually create value?
Yeah, I've definitely been in a site where I have peers in a one-trick pony of a site, where if we do one precise thing with one precise piece of equipment, and the peer not know how to use that equipment.
Yeah. So for sort of a metaphor, imagine that you're the boss of a logging company. You're just doing one thing. You're cutting down trees, you're loading them on a truck or a helicopter, and you're taking it to the sawmill, right? And you don't know how to cut down a tree. You don't know what tools are used. You don't know how to use the tools. And then you kind of gave up your right to have an opinion. Is that?
Absolutely. And that's fine if you have a high trust environment where you want the people you hire to have their own opinions, make their own biased decisions. But you can't have that and have your own opinions and directives.
Good. I'm glad you went that direction. So you can have sort of senior management that's checked out almost, right? So I've experienced that where, the structure of the company is not very enlightened or modern. And so you have like a boardroom up here that's like, we're going to implement this change, right? But we know that is like the least effective method of management, right? And you can read a whole library of books on why that sucks. But so they pass it through, and you have these senior managers. Now they're not C-level, right? They're VPs and stuff, and they're like, oh great, another program. Okay guys, have fun with this, and that's it. Right? So I would say like those situations, they're ineffective, right? But then you can also have examples where they're counterproductive. Like senior managers can actually tear down value, right? Depending on how they handle this, right? And you have your finger, I think, on something really important, which is sometimes you'll have a senior manager and they care a lot about the needed sudden rapid improvement, probably because they're being pressured, right? So they care a lot about it. They don't know the business. They've never actually learned, the real business, right? Not a spreadsheet, not the accounting books, but the actual physical work that creates value, right? Transforms inputs to outputs, right? But then they have an opinion. Right?
I run an ice cream shop, but I can't make a cone for the life of me.
Right. So then, yeah, exactly. And so then the boss comes in. He's like, "Well, what if we put an extra half scoop of ice cream on top? Do you think that would improve our sales?"
No, idiot! It won't flop right off the side of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Et cetera.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well. So, by the way, for you senior managers that are out there listening to this, we're not stepping on any toes. We're not judging anybody. But we are sharing our experience of more and less successful ways of doing stuff with the goal of helping you. And then if you're, not a senior manager, you're a level below that, just some things to watch out for, and some things to ask for, right, from your boss. So yeah, that's a, in my experience, common way of destroying value. And I have a story from my career that, I'm not going to share on here, but a senior manager running off, some of his best employees that made some of the most money for the company because he didn't have the discipline to go to the people doing the work and the humility to listen to them and make smart choices, and really just undercut some high performance, in a really dramatic way where, high performers aren't going to work for that.
Yeah, I shared a meme right after that. It happened in my personal life where it's a guy with a bunch of Uno cards and it says, admit you don't know how to run the business or draw 25.
Right. And the guy has a whole stack of
Like, I know. I've had a lot of focus around senior leaders that go, I'm the source of infinite knowledge. I'm like, no, the hell you aren't.
Yeah, but what do you think that comes from?
That's a great question. I want to say, and relatively young, so I can't speak largely for my past, but what I'm tempted to say is the previous legacy culture was everyone's always looking up and the person at the top has all the answers to spit down and throw at you. Instead of it being a collaborative, recent business theory, let's get all the data from everybody we can and let's make the best decision.
Yeah, that collaborative, democratic, agile, high speed, Silicon Valley, modern, but we say modern, but it's almost a quarter century.
But we do a good job of we want to cling to a military style philosophy. Where we're all telling everybody exactly what we're doing.
Top down.
It's about compliance. Here's what your pyramid looks like and who you report to. Then we illustrate in a way that doesn't work.
But you know why that works in the military? It works because you can't fire the president. He's the head, right? It can go all the way up, right? Because of the democratic process.
Yeah. There's also a bottom level social construct where you're not going to get kicked out unless you're at the absolute bottom of the barrel. And the people that you went through basic with are holding you in there together. And then they've created a really good avenue for you're going to be a part of this cog in the larger machine. Yeah. And guess what? Other industries don't have that.
Yeah.
I don't have the I'm paying for where you sleep and eat to come to work.
Yeah.
No, you're coming in.
Yeah, I can kind of tell you what to do because you're sleeping in my building and eating my food.
You eat my food and drink my water.
Plus you're
trying to keep my clothes.
Plus you're trying to keep a bunch of 20-year-olds safe.
Alive.
And
that's the goal.
They have deadly weapons, right?
So it's funny how we misapplied that philosophy and we'll do something simple. I always go back to the ice cream shop. You'll have a manager that treats it like it's the army battle.
Right.
Oh my God, a wrong ice cream flavor went out. Ah!
Right.
You think they unpinned a grenade whenever they wrote it. Right. Not the end of the world, buddy.
Yeah, definitely. Appropriate response. I'm, have a reputation for being, aggressive, high energy, intense is what the word my wife uses. You're really intense, right? Well, I have a lot of fun. I love what I do, and I am intense. It matters. Being excellent matters to me, right? But having social and self-awareness and emotional intelligence to apply the right response is not only important for managers, but it's almost the definition of sanity, right? If you drop a frozen turkey on your toe and you scream and holler and curse, I understand because I've done that before, right? That hurts, right? If you're misspelling something while you're typing and you have the same response, there's something wrong with you.
One time, I worked as a temp job right out of high school in a salt factory. So this salt factory, your whole job was you move a barrel under a pile of salt, and it pours 250 pounds of salt, and as soon as that's what the drum weighs, you move it off, put a top clasp on it, seal it, notate the weight and the time you did it, and you manually push it along a conveyor line. And at the end of about 40 yards of conveyor line, you grab it, you slowly tip it over to get it on a pallet. 4 drums on a pallet and you're good to go. Well, my first day, when I'm moving them, 2 drums caught my fingers. And it didn't hurt that bad. It looked like it was scary, but it didn't hurt that bad. This bruised really bad, but by the end of the day, I lost my whole fingernail on my ring finger.
Did you get salted?
The next day I went to work and I'm doing my regular, just going about my business. I'm not a wimp, and I go and I move that very first salt barrel, and I kid you not, as manliest thing I've ever done. As soon as my fingers touched the idea of the salt, I cried like a little girl, immediately. It was not a, oh, this hurts. It was a, ah, 2-year-old tantrum on the floor style cry, and I have never had a worse pain in my life.
Dumbest thing I ever did, I had a road rash. I fell off my bike back when I used to motorcycle, and so I had this patch of missing skin, and I was like, I should put salt in it because everyone knows that's antibiotic, and you use it to cure meat, so it's got to work, right? So I rubbed salt in it, and about 20 seconds later, screamed like a little girl. But what's weird, I don't know I'm not a doctor or whatever, but it like developed this weird thick scab, like almost immediately, where I rubbed the salt in, and then like I have a scar to this day. So it was, don't use salt to treat wounds. It's a bad idea.
If it's in your first aid kits to save money, just...
Yeah, there's other stuff, betadine, Walgreens, so you can get it off the shelf. Okay, so effective senior management. So at some point in the future, we'll talk about rapid change initiatives, right? Because really, like as a consultant, that's kind of your job. Like if they're calling you, right?
Yes, it's not a culture, it's not a sustainable thing you're going to do tomorrow.
That's right.
It's a rapid change initiative that gets you the outcomes you need now.
Right. And I like to use a metaphor here, and so this kind of goes out to some of you senior leaders and potential clients, right? If you're thinking about hiring a consultant to come in and help you, highly recommend it because they can see things that you can't see, right? But there is a danger there, right? And I like to use the example of some of Gordon Ramsay's television shows. So he has one where he comes in and fixes a restaurant, right? And after watching a couple of those, like I never want to eat at a restaurant again. Like I see what goes on in the back of the kitchen, right? So he'll come in and the story's always the same, right? It's always bad management, right? Like occasionally an employee gets fired, but usually like if there's issues with the employee, it's just because they weren't being held accountable to begin with.
Yeah, the manager even knows about it. It's several was like, we're pretty sure she's stealing.
Yeah.
Have this conversation now. Don't wait and lurch around for a proof to go, are you stealing really?
It's your business. You got to handle it. Yeah. And so they get the restaurants fixed up, and there's a lot of cursing, and it makes really good TV. Don't ever copy Gordon Ramsay's lack of leadership style. Highly unrecommended. But then you watch an old season, then I'll get on Google and I'll look up the restaurant. It's like it closed 3 years ago, right? And they even have, I think, some episodes where like they go back and check, and that happens because it didn't stick. It was a rapid change, and like for a while Gordon Ramsay was there, like they improved, but they couldn't sustain it, right? Because the foundation wasn't there and the culture wasn't there, right? So that's a big pitfall. You got where you got because of the processes and systems you have in place, right? So if somebody comes in and says change this and this and this and you'll get different outcomes, that's great, but is the engine designed to output that, right? Because you can make anything do what you want for a very short period and then collect your check as a consultant and move on, and then a few weeks later, a month later, half a year later, the business is back to where it was, right? That's the sustain part, right? If you're using like DMAIC, right, the control part, that's a problem with rapid change initiative, right? Is how do you raise the foundation? Like, you can take a motor and run it at peak efficiency for a few minutes and make a certain amount of horsepower, but you can't run it there all the time or it's going to blow up.
I can overclock my computer, but it'll melt.
Yeah, if you run it overclocked all the time, it's going to melt, right? So you have to find a way to bring the basic capability of the system and processes up, right, to sustain that.
Well, that's a really good point. Is where I see most often, and as I've grown on LinkedIn over the past 6-7 months, is every single person I talk to that it's this polished Lean Six Sigma operational excellence consultant of some sort. They only know the word waste, which is the bottom rung of what you need to address and adapt to if you're even going to be successful in a consulting environment. In fact, if you don't get rid of waste at all, that's perfectly fine. If you just addressed overburden, you would be your world would be better. You collect your check, go home for the night.
Yeah, I remember I was having a conversation with somebody in the lean community, and I'm not going to name drop, but you'd recognize the name. And they were saying, in Toyota plants, waste is the last thing they look at, right? So there's Muda, Mura, Muri, and Muda is the last thing you look at. You look at overburden and unevenness first, right? Because if those aren't fixed, then you really can't remove waste, right? Those are kind of a form of waste, but You know, it's like if you're working 14 hours a day and I remove some waste in your work and you're still working 14 hours a day, you don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't care. You're overburdened.
That's a big part I loved about the article where you referred to a fireman who was required to install smoke detectors.
Right, yeah.
Like, that's 2 feet of water in the house, but I have to go search for this smoke detector. Because you raise a good point, and that's the people doing the work immediately lose all their respect for you.
Yeah.
Immediately. You miss the real problem. Again, even if it was a less exaggerated example, like you said, a leaky faucet within the article, is I've had times where it's as simple as, is the Wi-Fi good within a facility?
Yeah.
In an area where it's not. If I walk through that facility and I start talking about signage, it's totally meaningless to the person who's struggling with the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that ties into some of the leadership culture as well. Like, let's say that you have this is kind of a true story, right? So at a site where there's holes in the Wi-Fi. And this is important because all of the employees use handheld computing devices to do their work, right? And when they lose connection to the Wi-Fi, not only do they have to go through a frankly painful process of logging in. I don't know why they haven't figured this out yet with handhelds, why it takes 7 minutes to log in and you got to chase that little dot around the screen, you know, with your
calibrate.
Yeah, exactly.
Calibrate.
Like, really? Did it get uncalibrated since the last time I did this? You know, which was 30 minutes ago. But then they would be locked out because the system still thinks they're logged in already, and it won't let you log in twice. So then they'd have to go find a specialist. This is like, you know, over 1 million square foot building. So they'd have to find a team lead or somebody like that who had the authority to unlock their account. I mean, it was really ridiculous.
I was real surprised that we haven't figured out the very basic language gaps that are associated to that. It's like, imagine at the ice cream shop as you work from your handheld device, you go up there and it's like, dispense vanilla substrate.
Yeah.
Why can't we just call it what it is? But we haven't crossed that gap because, like, the IT people don't do any of the actual work.
Yeah.
The people that do the actual work.
So we got to have an episode on like implementation, like IT, because that's a big thing. But the point here is, you know, if you have the right mindset, I would call it a lean mindset, right? But if you have the right mindset as a leader, when someone raises this issue to you, the response should be, get a contractor in there, get a quote, let's see what it's going to take to get the proper Wi-Fi coverage. And instead, the response that I got was, well, can you put together a CapEx to figure out if it's worth solving?
Can you wave it around at the other end of the building and see?
Yeah,
but do that.
But the level of disrespect, right? Like, we know a lean pillar is respect for humanity, right? You are telling people that unless you know it's going to save you money, you're not going to remove this headache from their job. Now, I've done picking, right? I know what this is like. And you drop your Wi-Fi signal and, you know, you're pacing yourself. You're in a rhythm, right? Doing your work. And all of a sudden, you got to mess around with this computer, drive around the building, look for somebody to fix it, whatever. It's
anything that detracts momentum from a variable job is the worst thing you can do to that person.
It's horrible. It's the worst job experience. And so think about, you know, and this is a key point because not everything is dollars and cents. You can't put a financial value on some things, right? And that's why respect for people is a pillar of lean management, respect for humanity, because the chances of being able to put a CapEx together on some of this is like prohibitive. I mean, you probably could, or more likely you just make it up. You know, well, on average, we're going to estimate that it drops out this many times, that takes this many minutes, times this head count.
Here's your $2 million.
Yeah, it's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And
here's your Excel
most
money.
managers they have experience with like, oh, well, I filled out the form and turned it in with bullshit, so now I'm going to get approved. You know, I mean, that's more waste. And again, that has to do with senior leadership culture. If you're asking for that, you're wrong. If you're asking for that, you're wrong.
I had a term I came up with that relates directly to that I couldn't find on the internet, so I can claim it as my own. Superfluous quality. So it is a system designed to give you more than what you need to get it done. For an example, the CapEx form in itself. So it's an extra step that's supposed to create something for the company, but really all it's doing is introducing more waste.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time. That, I think that's a result of having people in the system, right, that don't understand the philosophy or the ideas. They just know tools, right? So I started out, as a software engineer in college, and I didn't graduate with that degree because I figured out really quickly I'm not suited to sitting behind a computer all day. But I was very suited to the work. I was very good at it. And of course I have engineering courses and all of this, further education. I'm good at that. My mind works that way. So I've had an opportunity to work with, live with, and go to school with a bunch of engineers, right? And, you have this like professional jargon that lets you communicate more quickly, right? Just like doctors do. It makes the job more efficient. You don't have to use a paragraph to talk to somebody. You can just use a specialized word that nobody else understands, right? Like 10 mod 9 instead of, well, divide 10 by 9 and take the remainder. What's the remainder, right? But a lot of these folks that I worked with sort of are stuck in rigid thinking, right? Like they're so used to using math that only works one way that they forget when you're like out in an actual plant, like humans don't behave that way.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot actually, where it's like the lean group, their only thing they can provide is a fucking Excel spreadsheet. I'm like, here's a different Excel spreadsheet for this exact scenario and for this exact scenario. And it's purely related to manufacturing. So guess what? If you're in some different environment, it's not even applicable at all.
Yeah, and what are you trying to do, right? So I worked this was a warehouse, right? Now it was post-manufacturing supply chain. So even though our customer was a manufacturer, it's really, at that point, it's really retail supply chain, because the stuff this company's manufacturing is going out to retailers. So it's B2B distribution. And I remember we had an employee suggestion board, and we were disciplined in using it, which was great. And every week we would argue about, well, does that suggestion go on an A4 or a Kappa? I'm like, oh my God, you guys really, there's definitely a benefit to tracking your improvement on paper. For your portfolio, you can use it to sell customers, to keep a record of what you've improved in each area. But that's just ridiculous.
Reach out to John if you want his unique A6.
It's an A8. It's 2 sheets of A4.
Pre-definition, we've got another one in the post-control review.
I asked somebody, I was like, why it's called an A4? And they're like, I never thought about that. I think it's because you have to answer 4 questions.
Oh my God.
So, well, it's a paper size. And there was a reason they called it that, because it was such a breakthrough that you could solve a problem on a single sheet of paper. And the whole goal was, no, you guys used to have like notebooks of shit. You better solve this on one piece of paper. Keep it simple, stupid, right? And it's another example where the philosophy got lost. Like, that same guy today would be like, are you kidding me? You're using an A4? You need a Post-it note, right? Just go do it. So I'm not kidding, we filled out an A4 because there were lights out in the parking lot. Like, guys, go change the damn light bulbs, right? So, all right, let's circle back around. We're talking about the role of senior management and the need for rapid improvement sometimes, and how you can really support that and really kill that. So when you talk about bad senior management approaches, the one is ignoring it, right? The other is micromanaging, having an opinion, not knowing what you're talking about, kind of thing. So on the good side, though, I really was worried about writing, when I wrote my article, I was worried about writing this because it's not just common sense. It's every magazine article, everything online, every business course in the last 20 years has taught the same thing.
All wisdom is a truism type problem.
Yeah. Which is, if you're a senior manager, you need to empower, you need to champion, people to do this thing you need them to do and get the outcome you need them to do. But despite reading like a dozen books on that, I still see it as probably the thing that we suck at the most.
Absolutely.
In my experience, right? Is that fair? So somehow, even though it's considered common knowledge now that the way to be an effective senior leader is through empowerment, it's through compassion, it's through coaching, it's through clarity, it doesn't get done much. So an example, like if we're role playing, you have the site, I'm the senior manager, and my approach is, hey, Jake, you know that I hired you to do this job, and we're missing the boat in these 4 metrics. We've got to improve the site. I'm here to help you and empower you and remove obstacles. I need you to communicate. So we're going to talk every week. I want to put it on our calendar so we have a formal time, but call me at any time. Does that make sense? I need to know what needs to come off your plate to get this done, what needs to come on your plate to get this done, finances, anything like that. But I'm your guy, and I'm trusting you to get this done for me, right? Something like that. Okay, so I think we shared one, example of that happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being done well or successful. What do you look for?
Well, as somebody with like my own internal drive and engine for getting stuff done, I absolutely love the boss that's direction is, well, let me know when you need to get it done and I'll do it. And just stay the hell out of my way, let me get it done. But I also realize that not all humans operate that way. So the humans that don't, I've had plenty of peers in my past that are the same level of leadership but just don't get it, how to go out and just solve the barrier. I've got to spend a lot more time Socratically taking them through it. And that's really all I expect out of a senior leader is, well, tell me more about what's made us miss this metric. And that either requires I know my business or I don't, in which case that person can go know your business. Why don't you go stand in the middle of it and map that out for me?
Yeah. So I think one of the differences there, though, is, I'm not sure you should hire, like a GM that needs that kind of structure. Like, it's almost a requirement by the time you get to that level in the org that you're the kind of person that is, give me a direction and get out of my way, right? I'm sure that there's examples where people who require more concrete and structured instructions, right, do these specific steps, have been successful in that role. But I think it's probably a lot more difficult.
Well, I think largely, and I mean, you can tell me more in your varied past, I haven't come into a situation where somebody I reported to, let's say a GM or a director, had a really firm idea of what it is they were to set out to accomplish. So with them lacking clarity within their own role, I'm not surprised at all. They don't hire a GM, they don't hire a senior ops manager, don't have any good direction for them at all.
Yeah. No, I see a lot of, I know we need to get better, and that's the depth of clarity. Like, you don't get more than that. It doesn't go beyond that, right?
I hired you to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and so I've seen where like it goes the other direction with culture, where like someone will say, "Hey, I hired you to do it," and then I'll go in and I'll sort of deconstruct the business, and I'll say, here's the major barriers to success, things we have to solve right now, right? And I'm using language and examples, and they actually don't understand what I'm saying, right? So, there was one example where we had a software solution that would eliminate a ton of problems and also create visual management and awareness that you have to have for the type of warehouse we were running that we didn't currently have. It's amazing because it was a multi-billion-dollar company, and the software was a tier 1 WMS system, so it could do this. And I couldn't communicate both the need or the urgency to my boss in the organization, right? The approvers of that kind of capital investment, because they just didn't get it. It's as if they had never worked in high volume, high velocity, large footprint warehouse before, right? Like, this isn't negotiable. You cannot run this kind of warehouse the way you run your 200,000 square foot warehouses, right? So I see that as a barrier too, where sometimes you have people in senior leadership positions and they don't seem to know how to run the business, and so they can't even speak the right language, or maybe they want to listen to you, but they don't get it, right? So, my takeaway for senior leaders is put energy and effort into that conversation. Like, if somebody's talking to you and you don't understand them, or you think you understand them and you think they're full of shit and they're looking at the wrong thing, have the self-awareness and the humility to consider that maybe you don't know, right? And start using the 5 whys and asking questions to figure out, what are they getting at? Like, they're talking to you for a reason, right? Find out what that reason is. This is important to them, right? Like, I don't go to my boss and make stuff up.
Yeah,
right?
Just invent a reason to talk to him. Absolutely not.
And I also don't bring something up like if I think it's trivial or something I can solve myself, or not the most important thing, right? Because I want them to think well of me. Does that make sense?
Also, I'd take it a step further and just to focus on the language aspect. So in 3 different distribution centers, we can call it a location, a bay, or a stow. And I'm really extra careful to, however the employees in the team refers to it while I'm there, that's what we're calling it.
Right.
You don't get to take your own language wherever you go. Like for the director, you need to actively take steps to integrate yourself into exactly where the business is today. You can't take steps that separate yourself from that. So language being an option, dress code being a huge option. I see a guy walk through in a 3-piece tux and doesn't know a thing about the actual work going on. Like, I'm immediately disengaged. You're not me. We're all animals at the end of it. You're not me. I don't trust you.
Now, I worked at a warehouse that, the type of work, didn't require a fork truck license. It wasn't physically demanding. And so it was low dollar jobs, whatever. Vice president drives down from corporate in an S-Class, and he's wearing a tailored suit, the kind where it really unbuttons on the cuff, and tours the warehouse. And I thought, your lack of emotional intelligence is astonishing. And also, like, I think most of the employees, like, my feeling as he walked through the building was, like, you're living the high life off of my hard work. Like, you almost feel like you're a slave or something like that, like, I'm doing all this work, I'm not getting correct. If you can live that way and drive that car or whatever, then the distribution of value is not equitable, throughout the company. Warehouse, this was in Louisville, Kentucky, which is Midwestern, blue collar, down to earth kind of place. He should have been wearing like jeans and a polo shirt, something like that. People in that area don't dress that way, even if they're like bankers and stuff, So this was a guy that it was almost like cosplay. It was really like people were laughing at him behind his back, and I don't think he got it, but definitely had a negative impact on the culture, right? All right, I think that's about it. We should wrap up for this episode. Thanks for joining us. Great conversation. I hope to see lots of comments in the comment section. Hope you'll continue to join us. I'm going to try to make this a regular thing. We'll have to figure out how to work that out or whatever. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
10 more likes, I'll do this again.